Great. Well, welcome everyone. Appreciate you taking the time this evening to join us for our chapter meeting on Agile leadership practices. Jesse Fewell will lead us through that discussion. Daily habits for becoming a more effective Agile champion. I'm going to go through a few kind of chapter business slides here and then turn it over to Jesse. If you have any questions, your toolbar may not look like this. If you can stay on mute, except when Jesse asks you to go off mute. And if you could drop any questions you have along the way into the chat, that'd be great. Both Andy and Amer will be monitoring the chat, and we'll pose those questions where appropriate. So look for that chat button on your toolbar, whether it's up at the top of the screen or at the bottom. Special thanks to our sponsors, Apex Systems, and our three, we'll call them partners, VelociTeach and Peak Business, who offer project management, PMP, CAPM, and Agile training. And also our college university partner, Baldwin Wallace. We recently had a professional development day there at BW, and our desires to have International Project Management Day again at BW campus in November. So looking forward to that, and special thanks to all the sponsors and partners that have been supporting the chapter. If you have any experience using management tools, this is a plug for our Tech Thursday. We're not married to Thursday, but typically on the third Thursday of the month at noon, we would provide a technical topic from a practitioner. So somebody that uses a project management product could demo it to the chapter, to members like you, to give you a feel for what tools are out there, how they use them. So it could be a tool, it could be a technique, a process or whatever. We're open to anything. Ideally, they would be from practitioners, actual users. If you have anything that you're proud of that you want to show off, we'd love to have you. Like examples like Jira, Monday, Microsoft Project. In the past, we've had Microsoft Planner, Mentimeter, things like that. So if you have anything, please send an email to VP Programs or to Member Services and we'll get back with you and get you scheduled. As a presenter, you get PDUs for prepping your materials, and audience members get PDUs for attending. So it's a great thing we do. Love to continue it. Love to get your support if you're something you can show off. All right, so I'm going to turn this over to Jesse. He is an author, coach, and trainer, helped senior leaders from Boston to Beijing transform their organizations to achieve more innovation, collaboration, and business agility. Today's topic is Agile leadership practices, daily habits for becoming a more effective Agile champion. And without further ado, thanks again, Jesse, for giving us this presentation this evening. I will stop sharing and hand it back to you.
All right. Well, I am super excited, honored, privileged, grateful to be here. I am a project manager. Thank you very much. That's right. You know, just talk to the hand. It's right. Yeah. So I love hanging out with my people and talking shop. And today we're going to be talking about how you can upgrade your influence, how you can amplify your impact, whether it's working in the business, which is delivering projects and products and delivering new capabilities, or if it's working on the business where you're running some kind of a large change initiative, a transformation, a new business unit. Either way, those are projects. And we're here because we are change makers. We're here because we take current state and make it into future state. But you know what? It can be challenging. It can be tough. So I'm excited to hang out with all y'all, Great Lakers, Great Lakes people. I'm based out of DC. Same time zone, but kind of different general geography, but a common mission. So I've got one thought that I want to share with you more than anything else. One thought that is going to be driving through the entire presentation that I'm going to share, as well as the conversation that we're going to have. And it's a real simple thought. And if you take nothing away from the hour, take this. You are the leadership role model for everyone around you. You know, one of the jokes as a project manager I hear all the time is we have all the responsibility, but none of the authority. Have you ever heard that one? Yeah, I'm sure you have. And so we find that there's so much that we want to do, but it's frustrating because we don't have the fancy title. We don't have the big budget. We don't have the buy-in. We don't have. And we're just looking at those people up there. If you could just do this, then everything would be great. And everyone else on the project team is not looking there. They're looking at us. And so we have the obligation to rise up, to step up and fill the shoes of the leader that we're being called to be with the teams that look around, project teams. Even if they're reporting to us, they're probably not based on the research of project managers around the globe. But if they're not reporting to us, they're still looking at, all right, so how's Jesse going to be doing? All the responsibility, none of the authority, none of the budget, none of the title, none of the buy-in. I'm curious to see how Jesse's going to react or how you're going to react. And that's what we want to explore today is how can we be the leadership role model, regardless of what level in the organization you sit in. You might be an influential contributor that doesn't have direct reports. You are a project manager, maybe a scrum master, maybe you're a tech lead, a team lead. You've got impact and influence based on your tenure, based on your years of experience, based on your expertise. But then some of you might also be like Maria, the manager, who does have direct reports and does have some budget. Maybe the title is like a director level or an actual people manager. But leadership is for us as well as people with fancy titles like Emmett the executive. Emmett the executive might be a leader of leaders. And we use the term leadership often as a synonym for executive, when in truth, leadership is merely influence. And all of us have influence by virtue of the roles that we're given, the responsibilities, the challenges. And it's hard. It's hard because we're experiencing more change in the marketplace, in the industry, in the world of work than in the history of mankind. Historians, futurists, management professors are all coming out and saying, we're seeing more change just in the last 5 years than some generations have experienced in their entire livelihood. I mean, just think about the pandemic. And in the last 3 to 5 years, we've got a new hybrid work model that's been introduced, the Great Resignation, where people are starting to demand more of their work environments and employers. We've got social change like we've never seen, whether it's racial justice or gender equity. I mean, we're seeing now we're seeing like financial upheaval coming up with like, is it a recession or is it inflation or is it both? I don't know. Whatever you do, don't buy Bitcoin. There's so much crazy going on right now. And so it can be really intimidating as someone who's being asked to create clarity out of ambiguity, to create stability out of volatility, to create something that the teams can use, that our sponsors can use, that like a plan, a vision, a direction. When all of this crazy, it comes down to us. We are the leader role models for everyone around us. And I want to share with how you can help build your influence whether you're trying to get projects across the finish line, or you're trying to drive an agile transformation, or whether you're trying to drive culture change, whatever it is, we're going to talk about daily agile leadership thinking. What are the thoughts that run through your mind, and what are some thoughts that we should replace them with? We're going to talk about daily agile leadership habits. How do we move from mind to hand, from thought into action, so that we can start kind of building some new muscles in our work lives. And then we're going to close out with some daily agile leadership talking points. We're going to start moving from head to hand, and then also maybe to our voice, being able to convey and communicate words and ideas that can help drive more influence. Now, we will be a little bit interactive. So I hope you got your keyboards, and if you've got your microphones activated, we've got a little bit of a fun activity. So just keep your toe, stay on your toes. Is that, it's been a long day at work, and I'm excited to hang out with real awesome people. So sometimes I get a little bit flustered, but here we go. Let's first start talking about thinking. And it wouldn't be an Agile talk if we didn't talk about the Agile Manifesto. AgileManifesto.org is the source document for the Agile movement. Originally focused on the software industry, it's exploded now into all of tech, into marketing, into education. There are classrooms now that are using Scrum, for example. And in marketing, you've got like fast follow activities that are not just in digital, but also in indirect marketing activities as well. And so it's taken over the industry. And there are 4 key virtues here. And the first one really is about empowering. And so these are virtues about doing work a better way. And a lot of this is going to sound like really obvious. Like, wouldn't it make sense that we would want to empower people over process? Wouldn't it make sense that we want to value delivering working product out the door rather than spending all of our time doing paperwork? Wouldn't it make sense that we want to partner with our customers in a win-win scenario instead of having this win-lose mindset where in order for me to make money, you need to lose money in fixed price contracts, for example? Wouldn't it make sense that we would allow ourselves to update the plan every time we need to? Like, performance to plan is not as good as hitting our objectives. And wouldn't all this make sense if we just did this, regardless of what methodology, what practices or processes or techniques? You don't need to do backlogs in order to have an update to the project plan. You don't need to do sprints in order to get product out the door. These are just conceptual virtues of how to get work done. Here's the problem. For some reason, those of us who have chosen to advocate and promote this mindset around project work, somehow we start casting judgment. Those people don't get Agile. They're coming in here with their command and control attitude. They're trying to plan everything before doing anything. That's not Agile. They don't get it. And I'm an Agile project manager. I know better. I've been through the conversion mindset, and I know not to be command and control. I know I'm supposed to be empowering, and I want to empower my team, but they don't get it over there. That guy coming down here with all of his hot attitude. And, and the fact that they're asking for all the detailed project plan is obviously an intellectual shortcoming. I practice progressive elaboration and rolling wave planning, as was covered in the PMP exam when I took it 15 years ago. I know what I'm doing, but they don't. And so this is a thinking pitfall. It's a thought model that a lot of Agile champions fall into, where we're so agitated that everyone around us isn't where we are. And so it can start turning into a little bit of a high-minded attitude. And that's one of the things that might be impacting, it might be leaking out into our conversations, and it might be impacting your influence. Here's a better thought model. A better thought model is to understand that our context, the world of work that I just talked about, has more volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity than we've ever seen before. The term there is VUCA. It's an acronym, VUCA. When as human beings, we have a cognitive neurological need for stability, certainty, simplicity, and clarity. That's why stereotypes exist, because our brain is trying to make sense of all the different people out there. And so we put them into categories, artificial categories. We prejudge people because our neurological brain needs to make sense of things. And what's happening is, to today's world, the complexity of my heart and mind is not at the level of the complexity of our context. And we're running into that friction, which is why people are trying to group things into artificial categories. And they're trying to say tab A into block B. It's like, okay, we need exact definitions of when we should use agile methodology, an exact definition of when she used waterfall methodology, and never mix them because it's so confusing. And it turns out it's just a developmental gap. It's just a growth opportunity. And when we measure where people are, the same book, Scaling Leadership by Adams and Anderson, also measured leaders. They're the creators of the Leadership Circle, the #1 most popular leadership assessment tool. Check it out. It's pretty awesome. And what they found is that agile leaders, the ones who can fill the gap between the craziness of our context and the capacity of our minds, there's only about 28% that are able to do it with the satisfaction that all of us around us want. There's only about a quarter of all leaders in all roles in all industries, male or female, in all countries, that they have that kind of data, by the way. There's only about a quarter of leaders who get it right. And so whether you're a project manager who does a good job of balancing it, or a middle manager that does a good job of balancing it out, there's only about a quarter of us that are able to do it that effectively, according to their research. So on this call, there's not a lot of us who are able to walk the talk about bridging that gap, unless you took a look at another study from Bill Joyner, and his book, Leadership Agility, says, no, it's not a quarter of us, it's a 10th. Those agile leaders are really hard to find. The agile leaders that can deal with ambiguity, can deal with volatile change, can deal with the complexity of multiple dependencies all over the place, and deal with it by empowering people, engaging stakeholders, asking tough questions, but not solutioning, avoiding getting into the weeds. It's not easy. This is hard and it's rare. And so a better thought model, as opposed to judging people for being command and control or for having to plan everything up front, is just to recognize that there's an institutional ceiling. And by institutional, I mean across all of work and all of management, that we tend not to be as effective as leaders because we've got performance goals we got to hit, because the hierarchy has a lot of weight to it, because there's a lot of organizational inertia. You know, we're trying to solve these problems with modern ways of working. We're trying with agile ways of working. With that manifesto, we're trying to break through the institutional ceiling to give people more self-determination and deep equality. We're trying to do that. It's just really hard. So if you're a true believer in the agile movement, the daily thought activities that I want to encourage you to do is just to have more empathy, because it's easy for us to forget how stressful it is when even good things are happening. 60%, according to the ProSci research, 60% of anyone involved in an agile transformation actively resists it. 60% of anyone involved in an agile transformation actively resists the transformation, according to ProSci research. And so that's supposed to be a good thing, a transformation to make you more empowered, with better work-life balance, more reasonable commitments. That's supposed to be a good thing, and they're resisting it. So let's have empathy for people who are forced to change. You know, it's not that they're bad people with their resistance. It's not that they're immoral. They're just simply at the beginning of their journey. And, you know, she came out against this Agile thing, but she's got a point. Maybe we can throw people a bone, recognize the point they're making, because it might not be all wrong and all resistance. There might be some truth that's coming in some of the criticism when we're trying to drive new ways of working and try to drive more collaboration. So that's daily thought number one, is if you're a true believer in this Agile thing, have more empathy, remember the journey, have more balance between accepting criticism, but also advocating for progress. Here's another point. Effective leadership is balanced. So we're going to go back to that leadership circle. And what the research that Adams and the authors of the Scaling Leadership book is, they've identified some relationship competencies and some task competencies. It turns out that the best leaders score high on both people skills and tactical skills. You know, you've got the people manager who's got a lot of good people skills, but they're not really good at mechanics and planning. They're not really good maybe at that strategy. They're not really good. And so then we go to the other person who's really good on the strategy and the mechanics and the planning, and they're not really good at the people stuff. The best leaders bring both to the table. And it was also validated in the same book that I mentioned earlier, Leadership Agility, that there's two kinds of power style that leaders bring to the table. And remember, by leader, I'm talking about Ted, the team lead, Maria, the manager, Emmett, the executive, any level in the hierarchy. So each of us would be viewed as the best leaders if we had really good accommodative stance to compromise and take a step back and let other people have a place, be supportive and patient, asking good questions, but then also simultaneously knowing when to be firm, when to drive forward, when to be bold and act quickly. The best leaders bring both of these to the table, but that's not where most of us are. Remember, the data says that most of us, 75%, 90% of us, have a default on one of these. Now, if you're honest with yourself, when you go into a meeting or when you go into a project or when you go into a difficult situation, you're probably in one or the other camp. So for example, Jesse has a bias. I have a default. When I'm in a meeting, when I'm in an environment, I don't know if you can tell, I'm the chatty person. I'm the talky talk guy. I talk. And I consistently have people tell me, Jesse, stop talking. So I've got a little sticky note here on my monitor. Why am I talking? If you see that, it's a little sticky note to remind me. So I know my bias. I know my default, but I'm curious. What's yours? So we're going to do a fun thing. We're going to do a shout poll. When you go into a meeting, when the pressure's high, when the stakes are high, which of these two extremes describes your default leadership response to a tough situation? And when I say three, when I say ready, 1, 2, 3, go, all of you are going to unmute and you're going to shout into your microphone. Do you have more of an accommodative style or assertive style? You have more of an accommodative default or more of an assertive default, especially when the stakes are high? Are you more compromising, stepping back, support, patient, ask, or are you more firm, drive, bold, act quick? So here we go. Unmuting. We're unmuting. Okay. On the count of 3, are you more accommodative or more assertive? More accommodative, more assertive. 1, 2, 3, shout.
Accommodative.
Accommodative.
I heard a lot of accommodatives, but I also heard some assertives. Well done, ladies and gentlemen, for the shout poll. You use your technology quite well. I don't know if you heard what I heard. A lot of accommodatives, but there were some assertives that were buried in there too. So look at that. We're all project managers and we're not all the same. So here's my tip for you, your daily agile leadership thoughts. If you self-identify as being a little bit more accommodative and you need to work on some of those assertive skills, if you're usually quiet in a meeting, ask yourself what hasn't been said yet that really needs to be said. If it hasn't been said and it needs to be said and you're the only one that's thinking it, you have to speak up. If you find yourself holding back and waiting for the right person to give a green light or wait, ask yourself, is it really that dangerous if you take some initiative? If you're frustrated that nothing's happening, be the one that makes the first move. And if you're compromising a lot, if you feel that that's kind of what you do in difficult conflict situations, that can be an asset. But then you might also want to ask, what do you stand for? What do you stand for? And what would hold you back from standing up for a few things? Not everything, but just a few things that are truly important. Ask yourself some questions about how you can be more assertive. But if you're already a little bit too assertive, if you tend to if you sense that there's not enough people around you who are stepping up, or or that you're getting some critical feedback like Jesse's getting, ask yourself, all right, where could I compromise? And if I compromise now, what does that gain me down the road in the way of relational capital? If you're chatty like Jesse, give yourself a little bit of a protocol. I got my sticky note here, but you might just have a personal policy that says, I'm going to wait to see if somebody else brings this up. And I'm going to count in my journal how many times I chose to wait and how many times somebody brought it up before the meeting was over. And you're like, oh, look at that. 80% of the time I wait and somebody else brings it up. 20% of the time I bring it up because it's critical. And then if you've got FOMO, if you feel that, you got to be in all the meetings and people are asking you, why are you here? What do you do? Oh, I need to be in all the meetings. Well, maybe you can send somebody else, another team member, and you can create space and opportunity for other people to have ownership of taking a position in a meeting for one approach or another. So your daily thoughts, number one, if you're an agile champion, a true believer, be more empathetic, more balanced. And on that balance thing, if you're more assertive, find ways to be more accommodative and vice versa. Because the research shows that the most impactful, influential people bring both their assertive task skills and their accommodative people skills to the table. All right, let's talk about some habits. Let's move from the head to the hand. And one of the other things that we're learning about leadership is that it's a multi-stage journey. If you want to improve your impact, if you want to improve your influence, you got to recognize the journey. And it turns out that there are at least 3 stages of leadership development, 3 stages of leadership growth, again, independent of title, independent of your role. Most adults, the vast majority of adults, have what's called the expert mindset, where their expert skill sets, where they have a lot of expertise and a lot of experience, and they're really good at tactical outputs and hitting deadlines. Their skill set translates into their mindset, where now my value is in my contribution. My value is my work. And it's only about a third or so of the leaders who eventually are able to see beyond their skill set as expertise and experience to start seeing, you know what, I'm going to add a little bit more skills to the equation around coordination, around being more strategic and having more influence, to where now my value is not in what I do, but my value is in my results. And I can delegate more to other people. And it turns out that agile leadership that we were talking about, where we're perfectly balanced, we're totally invitational, and we walk the talk. Remember, Bill, this book said it was 10% of the population. They're the ones that are saying, you know what, it's even more than just my results. My true value is in the team that I can build that can achieve any result, any major milestone. My legacy is my true value, not my project plan. And so what we see is that there's this trajectory of growth again and again in leaders across the world, from what I do to what I can drive to who I can develop. And so for all of the work that you do, your growth as an influencer, as a leader, as a project manager, it centers around not what you do, but how you do it. So if I do project management, I can either be the hands-on expert who's got all the answers, and I can view that not only as my skill set, but as my core identity, or I can start enabling other people to take on some of the responsibilities. I can start driving other people, coordinating, managing dependencies, and delegating 80% of all of the work that needs to be done and doing less of the hands-on. Or I could even start to find a way to develop other people to handle the delegation, because some people aren't ready for the delegation. So what are you going to do? You're going to write them off, ignore them, marginalize them, go find that other resource that you can use? Or are you going to build them up because they're here for the long haul? These are three different kinds of approaches. For everything you work on, you have a choice on how to get it done. And so I'm going to do another fun thing right here in the chat window. We're going to do a leadership habits assessment. We're going to do a little bit of a self-assessment. How do you as a leader go about handling the responsibilities you've been given? Are you more of a doer, more of a driver, or more of a developer, developing other people to do the doing? And we're going to start, I'm going to give you kind of an example. We're going to list things out. We're going to write the default approach. Remember, we all have that default power style. We also have that default response to responsibilities. And then the desired approach. So here's Jesse's problem. If I were to talk about one of my core responsibilities as a project manager, it's PowerPoint. I'm doing briefing decks all the time. Now, most of my projects these days, they tend to be around organizational change and transformation. So I can reuse some of those slides, but I'm always in there doing it, even when I have a team around me. And I got to look in the mirror and I got to admit, I'm a little bit controlling about the messaging. I'm a little bit controlling about that. And I default to being hands-on with PowerPoint. So, you know, if I delegate more of it, I might have more time to do other things. And I might give other people an opportunity to grow in their own skill sets too. That'd be a better leadership move on my part instead of only controlling the PowerPoint all the time. So what are some ideas? How can I do this? Well, maybe I move all the files from my laptop and delete them. So I literally can't do the PowerPoint. I literally have to rely on other people to do it. Now I'm going to set their expectations. I'm going to give them some guidelines, and then I'll tell them where the files are located. I might even schedule a preview of their work before I submit it. But I'm going to start making some changes. I'm going to let them know I'm making changes so it doesn't feel weird. Jesse, stop doing the PowerPoint. What do we do? So now it's your turn. In the chat window, type one responsibility task that you find yourself doing again and again and again that it's probably not the best use of your time. It's probably not the best use of your skill set. So what's a core responsibility? We had things like meeting minutes. We had things like distributing the project plan. So I'm looking for one of you project managers to type in the chat window. What's a core responsibility or a meeting or a phase deliverable that you find yourself doing? Mary finds herself doing a lot of research. Alana's copy meeting recordings into the SharePoint. Michael's got monthly management reports. Tom's got the meeting minutes. Man, those meeting minutes are killer. They really are. And the more years of experience you have, the more that's not a good leverage of your time. Terry's got the good old fashioned weekly status reports. There we go. All right. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. We're going to move to step 2, which is for each one of those, for the one that you chose, what's your default approach day in, day out? I kind of anchored it a little bit. Do you find that for that responsibility that you tend to be mostly doing it hands-on? You tend to be the one typing the meeting minutes all the time? Or do you tend to be the one that drives another person to do the meeting minutes, but only the person who can do it? You're not going to delegate that to somebody who isn't ready for it. Or are you the person that's going to delegate to somebody who's never done it before and develop them and grow them into being able to do it? Mary is and Linda, they're like, yeah, my default is hands-on. So well done, Mary, Linda, for kind of acknowledging, yeah, I tend to be a little bit too hands-on. Dave saying, yeah, I do it. I am a little bit hands-on, but I actually am trying to delegate more and drive others to do it. So that's good. And we're going to.
Someone needs to mute their mic.
If we could, there we go. Thank you. All right, so that's your default. Now, type in the chat window, like Dave said. Dave says, I am working to delegate and drive others to do it. Which one do you think would be the next best move? Are you already delegating some of those deliverables and documents, but you're finding that when you delegate it, they're not doing it as well as you, and it might be time to develop their skill set in doing it well, doing it better? Or is your first step really just to delegate it and find out how well they can handle it? We may never know until we actually do that delegation. So you've got your default, and then you've got your desired. Alana says, I wish I could delegate. Yeah, you might not have as much in the way of people to rely on. You might not have as much in the way of talent to rely on. You might need to do a little bit of developing of others in order to do it. You might even start to build your assertive skills and ask, hey, can I get budget for an assistant, a project assistant, not a personal assistant, project assistant? And then finally, brainstorm. That's the brainstorming we got to do. Like, could I ask for 10 hours a week from a shared resource? Could I ask for a budget of $1,000 a week for a virtual assistant? Could I ask one of my team members to step up to the table? Could I live with one or two of the reports being done 50% by me, 50% by them, and then gradually roll them in? So like what, so what are some ideas that come to your mind? I'm going to wait just a moment here. Some ideas that come to your mind to help you make that transition from default to desired habit. Michael has an incremental step for himself. He's already delegating maybe some of the technical, some of the schedule, some of the cost and risk on his MMR. But what if he were to delegate the whole thing? That might be the next logical step for him. What would be something that you could do? I shared a couple of ideas. That's the challenge for you. So this is a 4-step process. A 4-step process for you could just assess what are the regular habits that responsibilities. What's my habit? Because higher order leadership influence is moving from habit to intent, from doing things on autopilot to doing things on purpose. And then that becomes a way that you can begin to amplify your impact. Finally, we're going to move from head to hand and now to voice. And we want to start talking about how we can communicate in a way that reflects that kind of accommodative and assertive blend, that reflects our intent to delegate more, to develop others more, as opposed to maybe just writing people off and they don't get it. So here's a couple that I want to share with you. First, whatever you do, give your people a heads up. And by your people, I mean your team, I mean your manager, your stakeholders, and let them know, hey, I'm working on my leadership skills. You can do a little name dropping. My leadership coach is Jesse Fewell, and he and I worked on a personal development plan together, which we just did in the last 30 minutes. And I'm working on my leadership skills. And you may notice me trying to be a bit more assertive, accommodative. It might look a little bit clumsy, but just know that it's intentional. And I might even ask you for some feedback. So that way, you know, when I'm asking you for feedback, it's not a trap. It's not a trick question. I'm actually trying to work on a few things to grow in my role. Now, you some of that you can share to anybody. Some of that you might only want to share to some trusted colleagues. You might just want to give them a heads up that you're going to change your approach on a few things for a couple of strategic reasons. Some people you may not want to share this kind of honesty, but make sure that as much as you can, you do, because the more people who know that you're coming from a place of good intent, the more grace they're going to be willing to give you. Then delegate with sincerity. A lot of times when we're delegating more as project managers, as leaders, we can come across as bossy. You're the best resource for this, and you got all these resources. I'm not a resource. I'm a person. And oh goodness, okay, I didn't realize I touched a button there. Instead, you could just simply say, "Hey, I know how I would do it, but I'm more interested to see how you would do it because I'm trying to open myself to other opinions more and more these days. I'm working on trying to build a diversity of input from different ideas. So I'm not going to share with you how I would do it just yet, because I'm curious what other ideas are out there. And then throw people a bone and say, oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. Maybe we can find a way to incorporate that in. Just because you ask doesn't mean you commit. So if you're asking for people to try it out, set those boundaries before, but then also be sincere about what your boundaries are. Like, listen, I'm trying to work on this, or listen, we need more people to get involved in doing these meeting minutes and these deliverables. There's just too much going on. We need more people to get involved. I'm willing to help anybody who's willing to step up. And yes, this can be a high profile. If you want to do the presentation, the executive team, I'm more than willing to let you do it. We need more people to step up. That's delegating with sincerity. And then also remind them of the big picture. When you're trying to ask people to take more ownership over their work, to be empowered, you might get a lot of crickets. You might get a lot of awkward silence. And if you say, listen, I know we have our immediate goals, but we want to achieve those goals in a way that's sustainable. So how can we achieve our business goals without hurting our personal lives, without burning out, without compromising quality? So we want both. So how might we do this differently? And finally, catch them doing it right. If you're an agile champion and you're trying to promote change in the way we do things, if you're a project manager and you're trying to promote a new capability in the organization, if you're a change manager and you're trying to institute a new organizational culture, a new organizational approach, catch people doing it right, because it's a bumpy ride. It's a roller coaster. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sometimes it's 2-3 steps back before you got to get a couple more. And so if you see somebody doing something right, tell them, you're really impressed how you closed that meeting. You repeated others' ideas and invited volunteers. That's the culture that we're trying to make happen. Well done. And then that's a really good way for you to role model the leadership behaviors that you hope to see in other people around you as well. So that's what I wanted to share with you, is just some ideas about how you can challenge your own thought patterns each and every day, how you can challenge your own habits each and every day, and then some talking points to give people a heads up, delegate with sincerity, remind them of the bigger picture and catch them doing it right. And if this was interesting to you and helpful to you, then feel free to reach out to me. We do have a workshop, the Certified Agile Leadership Workshop, that kind of goes into this a little bit more depth. But thank you so much for letting me come and talk. This is how you can get in touch with me. And if there's anything that you want to talk about, we're going to open up to Q&A. But thanks so much for listening.
Great. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you, Jesse.
I want to give a quick little shout out. Alana was made the observation that she doesn't have necessarily anyone to delegate to, but maybe instead of delegating, I can request assistance. I love that. That's the perfect kind of brainstorm to shift your stance. It's a little bit of a risk taking by, admitting that there's the need for some help, but by doing that, you might invite more people into the decision making and the creative and the delivery. And my wife made a fascinating. This is funny where you get insights, in life, whether it's from your kids or your partner or your parents. But one insight that I got from my wife was the phrase, "A friend in need is a friend indeed." It goes both ways. Because if I'm asking you for help and I'm being a little bit vulnerable by asking for help, I'm a friend in need. I'm giving you a chance to add value. I'm giving you a chance to show off a little bit with your skills and expertise. And so I am indeed being a friend to you because I'm creating an opportunity for you to help me out with something that gives you a chance to shine and builds our relationship. And I thought that was a fun twist on the old proverb, "A friend in need is a friend indeed," because they're out for something. So well done, Lana. Asking for assistance might be a really good leadership move.
So I have a question.
Yes.
This is Mike Doherty. Sometimes I think of project management as creating a context for people to thrive, people to kind of do their thing. Do you think that falls under the accommodating or the assertive, or it's just sort of universal to project management? Or do you need me to explain more what I mean?
Well, Mike, thank you for the question. I like that because it's a really deep question, because what it's talking to when you say creating an environment, an overly accommodative leader would translate into playing nice and being everybody's friend. And an assertive leader would be one about, okay, you know what? Let's go change roles, responsibilities. Let's go change HR job descriptions so that people can be safe. Let's go create, your annual performance appraisal will include, on a scale of 1 to 5, how psychologically safe are your people feeling right now? And then we're going to assess you on it because, we got to make some changes here. But really, when you're talking about an environment, it's about changing the organizational system that we're in with both a little bit of the culture stuff and the structure stuff. So the most effective way to do that would be to have a conversation to say, here's what we're trying to create. Here's the behaviors and the systems that we have in place today. Here's what we're going for. Here's a couple of experiments we're going to try. And then you make some actual structural changes or some process changes. So that way you get that some of the task stuff, but then you're also very patient and clear with the people around in the environment. So it's a good question, Mike, because if you're thinking about trying to create an environment that's safe for people, the temptation might sound like that's a little bit of the wishy-washy people stuff, but it's actually about creating a high-performing environment with where we have a high morale correlating to high performance. And that requires both the accommodative skills to take people into consideration as we're trying to go through that journey, but also those assertive task skills to make the changes to support it.
Thank you.
Emily's got a question.
Thank you, Jeff.
Emily, you want to come off mute and share it? If not, we can just read it out.
Yeah, so Emily's question is, what
I'm
has,
sorry. I'm sorry. I was totally on mute there the whole time. Sorry.
That's okay.
I was like saying hi and everything.
your voice
Apologies.
is better than mine. Go for it.
So hi, Jesse. My question for you is, what has been the greatest barrier to influencing the agile mindset? I have an idea as to what it is, but I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on this.
Well, go ahead, start with your idea.
Well, I think, and I'm wondering if others here on the line have the same idea, but I'm gonna guess it's probably corporate culture, right? So if folks there up at the top are used to a certain way of working, that's kind of how it is. And introducing change, like you said, is scary, and we like to put people into certain buckets and things. So that's kind of, at least, like, if your culture is not open to change and thinking differently and open to new ways of working, that's really hard to steer a big ship, right? When you're the leader of that group of people. But that's my opinion.
Well, I think you're a genius. And I want to give a big +1 to the observation that culture and leadership are two sides of the same coin. So first, I'm feeling that there's a difference between an organizational culture and an individual mindset. Because an organization doesn't have its own mind. An organization is a collection of individuals that each have their own autonomous mind. Organizations don't do work. The people inside the organizations do the work. So if we want to talk about what's the greatest barrier to an agile culture, then it's absolutely the culture that's already in place. And so we call that the institutional barrier we alluded to earlier. So what we want is we want some leaders to make some changes, to structural changes, to make some different kinds of talking points to engage people. And those leaders will have an impact on the organization structure. And then that will challenge other leaders to start behaving and talking differently. And then once that starts going, then there'll be a couple of other changes that go, and that'll influence more leaders, as opposed to the new hotshot change leader that's coming, the new CTO. I'm coming in, CTO. We're going to go agile. We're going to come in and immediately get shut down by the rest of the culture because she was coming in too fast and too furious for the culture to handle. And so when it comes to the barrier to an agile culture, the research is overwhelmingly that what's in the way is the culture itself. And we need to make some changes in an incremental fashion and get that flywheel going. And change some of the structure that changes some of the culture, that changes some of the structure that changes some of the culture. What goes against the agile mindset, however, is personal will. With a lot of transformations, a lot of people are having transformation change thrust upon them. And the fundamental difference between successful change and unsuccessful change is the degree to which the people involved are brought along versus dragged, kicking and screaming. And for that, it's about reducing the friction between what we want and what they want. And this is work that was done by William Bridges, where he, in his book Transitions, said one way to think of it is, instead of challenging people, you need to change your mindset. That's not an agile mindset. You need to think more like me. We can ask them, what do you want to change around here? Like what's at risk if we do things differently? And then you start finding out what their assumptions are and their belief systems. And it's only when people have new experiences that they change their belief systems. So we need to find those small wins and make those small wins relevant and compelling, so that way people feel like, oh, so maybe planning everything up front doesn't have to happen all the time, because I just worked on this pilot project where we only planned the first half of the project and it went fine. Oh, it's only when I experience that my worldview begins to shift. So 2 key points. 1, changing culture is not the same as changing individual mindset. There's different dynamics there. But when it comes to changing the personal mindset, it really is about giving people a chance to have new kinds of experiences rather than demanding that they shift overnight.
Yeah,
I don't
that
know if
makes sense. No, it definitely makes sense, because it's kind of like you kind of give them some skin in the game as well, right? It makes it more impactful for them. And it shows that you're listening and taking into their considerations versus just being like, okay, this is how it is. And there you go. Right. So thank you, Jesse. I appreciate you answering my question.
Sure thing, Emily. If you all have not been through ADCAR, go through ADCAR. The ADCAR change model that's put out by ProSci. There's a certification that goes with it. It blew my mind as to why people are not on board with change. And that's what all of it is. It's a change management approach. And it talks about making sure that whatever your project, whatever your transformation, whatever your change initiative, have you covered the why we're even doing this? Have you broadcast it 10 times more than you think you need to? Have you covered the WIFM, the what's in it for me on the ground? If you haven't covered the why, the big picture, or the WIFM for me and my personal experience, your change has no relevance to me. And so that it was a really good program that really amplified that skin in the game, Emily, that you described is huge.
Great. And any other questions out there?
Kate's got a good tip on getting info on ADCAR there in the chat window. Thank you, Kate.
This is Pam Adams. Not sure if there's.
Hi, Pam.
Hey, so I work on a small team of Agile coaches. We train and coach, and we've been doing a grassroots, I call it a grassroots transformation of a large organization, sort of team by team, system by system. And we kind of created a program, and we're doing it. We've been doing it for a few years. And so we're constantly, every few years, we're asked, you know, this time frame that you have for your program, where we say we train and then we coach and mentor for up to two years. Like, based on our experience, we've said it can be up to 24 months to kind of take a team on a journey from what we call startup to an operating maturity, which isn't like, you know, we had to come up with measures, we had to come up with a maturity assessment, you know, all the stuff.
Love it.
But we're constantly kind of every couple of years asked, this 2 years, can we accelerate that? And what, you know, I'm currently living it right now. But, you know, and the research talks about, you know, organizational change and different things, but in your experience, or just from your perspective, is that a decent, say, goal or target that we have? And we think it is, because we've been kind of running it that way, and some will reach a level sooner and some might take a little longer, because it's people, it's changes, everything we've talked about here, you know?
So Pam, who's asking the question?
Who else? No.
Is it the senior leaders?
Right.
So the answer, this is probably the single most relevant question that any Agile champion is asking, because they're like, we don't have 2 years to get Agile. And the answer is, well, what took you so long to get started?
Right.
Right? I mean, we could have been done by now if you jumped on board when the train was still, when it came to the station the last time. But now you're waiting until everybody else is gone onto the train, and then you want to see if there's room left in the final car. Okay. And so, number one, you're not accountable for their failure to act. In fact, you're the one with the credibility, because now they're coming to you saying, hey, can we get on the board this Agile train now? It sounds really cool. Can we make it faster so that I don't look like I wasted my time waiting for it to fail? So this is a relevant question, Pam, and the answer is yes, 2 years is totally reasonable. It's totally reasonable. In fact, there's industry data coming out from the Business Agility Institute. I think it came out 2 years ago, that says the average amount of time that it takes for a transformation to yield bottom line business results, like the bottom line, to have a positive impact on revenue and profitability, is roughly about 2 years. But that data is not as interesting as the other data that you have access to, which is your own organization. Because if the average is 2 years, then that means that there are some people where it takes longer and some people where it takes less time. And what you could do is you could go back and look at your data and say, of all of the teams, here's how long it took them to hit what we call baseline maturity. And then here are the teams that beat that baseline, and here are the teams that took longer than that baseline timeframe, the average timeframe to get to baseline maturity. And here's the characteristics of our organization's teams that beat the average.
Yep.
They had this kind of people, they had this kind of culture, they had this. And so do you have that, senior executive, of more important things? Because if you do, you might have a shot at beating the average. So Pam, you already are galactically more evolved and enlightened by virtue of having the data and the track record. And I would absolutely encourage you to stand behind the data and let it speak for itself, and make no apologies, and do not thrust upon your shoulders the accountability that other leaders have on their own.
No, thank you. Appreciate that insight. Thank you.
Terry has a follow-up question.
Yes, I was wondering, are there things that senior executives can do to help facilitate the agilization? Something that she could say to him when he asked that question? Well, if you would be willing to do A, B, and C, that would probably help expedite it.
Yes, Terry, that's an excellent question, because I have executives, senior leaders ask me time and time and time again. They say, Jesse, all I ever hear from Agile people is what I'm not supposed to do. I'm not supposed to get in the weeds. I'm not supposed to set dates. I'm not supposed to give direction. Can somebody please tell me what I can do to drive a more agile work environment, regardless of methodology, regardless of processes? And so there are some common practices out there, and what we need, senior leader, is we need your support for formal pilots. Can you help us get funding and resources for formal pilots? And ideally, we would want 2 to 3 pilots that represent a cross section of the organization. Number 2, can I get your support on training and learning and development? Can you help us find some budget, particularly training for middle managers who feel the most marginalized and threatened by an agile transformation? How they can contribute. Can you start role modeling the behaviors in your leadership meetings that we want other leaders to have? So in your leadership meeting, in your management meetings for the people who report to you, set a new expectation. Say, we're changing our culture here. This is how I'm going to try to behave, and I'm holding you to behave more like this. So Terry, excellent question. Those are just a couple of examples that I would recommend is sponsor and fund pilots, sponsor and fund training and development, particularly for middle managers, and then also role model the behaviors and hold people to a higher standard of those behaviors. That would be a great way to make it happen. So I know we're a little bit over time, but I love talking about this stuff.
A message to folks here. So I do have a couple closing business slides though, but I want to make sure everyone gets their questions out there. And then folks that have been dropping ideas and concepts in the chat there, the chat is, anybody here can download the chat. If you click on the triple dots to the next to the smiley face, you can click on save chat and it'll save it. So if you want to grab all these links, you can. Does anybody have any other questions for Jesse?
I will be offering a copy of these PDF of these slides so that you can have access to them. I am hoping to see several LinkedIn invitations, connections, requests. Feel free to reach out anytime with thoughts or questions on any of this stuff. I'm here to help. I've been on the journey just like you. So much love and gratitude.
Thank you, Jesse. So let me do the wrap up here. All right. For those of you that have a PMI credential, you can claim your own PDUs. That is the claim code. And as Jesse said, I'm going to send you a thank you email, everyone here, inclusive of this slide deck and Jesse, so that you have that file. That's how you can claim it. I'll leave it on the screen for 3 more seconds in case you're taking a picture. Otherwise, you're going to get it in an email in the next few days. All right. Our chapter website was just migrated to a new platform on June 3rd. So it's got a slightly different look. We're still making content tweaks and wrapping up some issues. Any project, as you know, there's usually some warranty stuff that we need to do. So we got a little bit of cleanup work afterwards, but it was a good migration. We have some chapter meetings, really cool stuff coming up this Saturday. We have a social event at the Garfield Park Metro Parks. We're doing a community event, charitable event, and also having a little picnic. Please join us. Go to PMINEO.org and register for that meeting. Love to see you there. We also have a Women in Project Management meeting at the end of July. Usually it's a book or a video review. Excellent way to get to know other people. And you don't have to be a woman to go to that Women in Project Management group. And then in August, on August 17th, it's also out there. We're going to the Guardians game. We have 20 tickets. Love to have you go and join us there in August. And we're going to be adding other events on the website as we go. We have a lot of get to know the chapter meetings out there and things like that. You can also follow us on social media, all 5 of our platforms. The links to those social media things are at the bottom of our homepage, PMINEO.org. Good way to stay connected with us in addition to getting the emails from us. Here's some other ways. You'll get this slide deck. There's other ways to keep up with your PDUs, lots of good podcasts, and different sources there. And I want to thank everyone. Again, thank you very much, Jesse. Appreciate you giving us this very informative presentation. And I want to thank the audience for attending this evening. Any final questions before we part? I'll check the chat real quick. Looks like we are good. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.